In this session, we shall be concentrating on macroeconomic concepts based on the works of Adam Smith and Keynes. A quick recap. Last class we talked about the triangular trade and grossly unfair systems of tariff and taxation which allowed European nations to hoard gold at the expense of their colonies. 1776 was a year of change. The 13 colonies of North America revolted against Britain's mercantilist practices, which basically boiled down to protectionism and monopolies, and its taxation policies. They were officially recognized as an independent nation in 1783 through the Treaty of Paris. Britain had lost one of its colonies in America because of its economic policies. Coincidentally, Adam Smith also published his book, commonly called The Wealth of Nations, in the same year. The climate was ripe for shaping economic thought beyond mercantilism. From hoarding gold to increasing production. He said that the true measure of a nation's wealth is not the size of its king's treasury or the holdings of an affluent few, but rather the wages of the laboring poor. It is the great multiplication of the productions of all the different arts in the consequence of division of labor which occasions in a well-governed society that universal opulence which extends itself to the lowest ranks of the people. It basically means we must increase productivity in order to raise the standards of living for all classes by providing enough goods to meet consumption requirements of everybody. Adam Smith's idea of productivity translated into two essential things: division of labor and accumulation of capital. Contrary to popular belief that mechanized production necessitated division of labor, Smith elaborates how division of labor historically contributed to efficient production in society and subsequently led to the invention of machines. Accumulation of capital is necessary to invest in more efficient methods of production, resulting in increased efficiency and more productivity. This was the nature of national wealth as per Adam Smith in 1776. It translates to this diagram where we see classes of people side by side, the kinds of income they make. Please note that economics and sociology seemed quite intertwined. The economic linkages between these classes were the subject of classical economics: households, industry, households provided labor, industry returned with wages, rents, products for production. The aristocrats of the state were usually interlinked, and then there was the foreign trade. Households in the rural areas paid rents to the aristocrats who owned land and taxes to the government, and they bought imports from the traders. Some traders took exports from the industry, while the aristocrats of the state provided capital to the industry. Smith insisted that free markets are essential for economic prosperity and they operate best without any governmental interference. Supply will always meet demand in a free market. However, government interference through tariffs, encouraging monopolies, shall impair its efficiency. This can be further studied in microeconomics, which we shall discuss in subsequent sessions. The market shall result in prosperity when it becomes wide enough to cater to all classes. This is the gospel of capital economics. The government does have a role in ensuring smooth functioning of the market and the nation itself. Market economy works only when property is secure and contracts are honored, which means the government has to maintain law and order. A standing army is required to protect the country and create an atmosphere amicable to trade. Public institutions like education, public banks, etc., need to be maintained by the government. So also public works like roads, bridges, and ports. Essentially, some kinds of works don't have much incentive for private businessmen, but its absence affects the entire country. These should be provided by the government. Smith's economic theory preceded industrial revolution, and his uh, emphasis on free market was taken as a gospel by most industrialized nations till the Great Depression hit almost the entire world in the 1930s. In 1936, John Maynard Keynes published his treatise on the general theory of employment, interest, and money. Economic classes defined by Adam Smith were largely changed by the time it was 1936. The landed aristocrats, labor, capitalists were replaced by what we called households and businesses. Households contribute to business through labor, services, and other resources like land or buildings for rent. Businesses give back through wages, rent, and manufactured goods for consumption. Apart from this, by the time it was 1930s, there was a third sector of an official government, a financial sector, meaning banks, and of course foreign trade. Households pay taxes to the government, put savings in the financial sector, and maybe buy imports through foreign trade. Each of these sectors contribute back to business. The foreign trade buys exports, financial sector invests through loans, and government provides subsidies and tax breaks. This is called the circular flow of money. It is a five-sector model, and Keynesian economics largely deals with the financial and government sector. Aggregate demand is generated as income is transferred to spending as a result of circular flow of income. In the figure that we have already seen, this much. The consumption, investments, government spending, and exports translates to aggregate demand. The relationship between AD and price level. As may be obvious, spending capacity decreases with increase in price, and therefore the AD curve is inversely related to price levels. It affects different sectors differently, and you can see that written on the slide. Aggregate supply is all the goods and services that are produced by the market. Firms consume capital goods, households consume consumer goods, government consumes merit and public goods, and exports are consumed by the foreign market. The aggregate supply curve is directly proportional to price because, as is obvious, when the prices are higher, the manufacturers tend to produce more. Macroeconomic theory is used to construct models of the entire economy at a national or regional level. It studies the relationship between the five sectors and how they affect the GDP. A macroeconomic policy allows governments to step in where market fails as per predefined objectives. Let's discuss about macroeconomic problems. Remember, these were the problems that Keynes was faced with in the 1930s, and we still face them today. We are aware of inflation as ever increasing prices, which makes any amount of money seem insufficient. On the positive side, inflation may be caused by an increase in aggregate demand. As spending capacity increases, the increased money flow in the market is absorbed by increasing the prices of the commodities, in case supply remains the same. On the negative side, increase in cost of production due to taxes, cost of materials, labor, etc. can push up the aggregate supply curve, requiring a higher market price to compensate for the higher costs. Deflation is a drop in aggregate demand which is compensated by a lowered aggregate supply curve. Unemployment may be classified into many types. Cyclical employment exists when individuals lose their jobs as a result of a downturn in aggregate demand. Example, short-term unemployment caused due to global recession. This does not really require government interference. Demand deficient unemployment is caused by a lack of aggregate demand with insufficient demand to generate full employment. This may be corrected by increasing economic activity to encourage new firms to open up and generate full employment. Structural unemployment occurs when certain industries decline because of a long term change in market condition. Example, shutting down of the textile mills in Mumbai had to be compensated by introducing alternate economic activity. Poverty. The alleviation of poverty is increasingly seen as a fundamental economic objective. Poverty creates many economic costs in terms of lost output, welfare provision, and exclusion of the poor from normal economic activity. In addition, the poor have little disposable income and so cannot spend and generate income for firms and jobs for individuals. Heartless as this may seem, this is poverty from a purely economic point of view. Equity, on the other hand, means fairness or evenness, and achieving it is considered to be an economic objective for most governments. For most economics, equity relates to how fairly income and opportunity are distributed between different groups in the society. Inequality may exist in terms of inequality of income, inequality of opportunity. And inequality of opportunity is usually what governments seek to resolve. Monetary and fiscal tools are used by governments to deal with macroeconomic problems. Monetary tools are usually used by the Central Reserve Bank, in our case, the RBI. Fiscal tools are used by the governments. These include tax policy, expenditure policy, investment or disinvestment strategies, debt or surplus management. In the five sector model, the government deals with the fiscal policy, the financial sector is dealt with the monetary policy, and international trade requires both fiscal and monetary policy for monitoring. These are the objectives of monetary and fiscal policy separately. Ultimately, what we would like to achieve remains the wealth of nations. So, how do we count national income? It is the total value of a country's final output of all new goods and services produced in 1 year. In accounting terms, only the value of the final output is recorded. In this context, we have both GDP and GNP. GDP is based on the geographic area. GNP also accounts for income from abroad, from citizens based abroad. In nations like China, UK, India, and Israel, GNP is lower compared to the GDP figure. This indicates that these nations are seeing a net overall outflow from the country. Citizens and businesses of these countries operating overseas are generating lesser income compared to the income generated by the foreign citizens and businesses operating within these countries. Coming back to Adam Smith, there is a difference between gross and net revenue as per Adam Smith. The gross revenue of all inhabitants of a great country comprehends the whole annual produce of their land and labor. The net revenue, what remains free to them after deducting the expenses of maintaining first their fixed and secondly their circulating capital. Their real wealth too is in proportion not to their gross but to their net revenue. GDP and GNP, as we have studied, do not deduct from the cost of maintaining our capital stock. This expense is known as depreciation. Therefore, the net national product deducts the maintenance cost of depreciation from the net private investment. National income, on the other hand, is the accumulation of all factors of income earned by residents of a country and includes some income earned from the country as well as abroad. NNP at market price, less indirect taxes, and add subsidies. These are some of my references. In the next session, we will be talking about political economy. Political economy is a branch of social science that studies the relationships between individuals, society, markets, and state using a diverse set of tools drawn largely from economics, political science, and sociology. Before economics and sociology were separated as two different subjects, political economy was the subject of study. And this shall serve as a link for us to go from economics to sociology. Thank you.